All right, good afternoon. Welcome back to the House Environment Committee. We are going to walk through the latest language in the Redemption Center PRO committee bill with our legislative counsel.
Hi, good afternoon. This is Mike O'Grady with Legislative Counsel. After our discussions yesterday, I went and drafted some of the changes you requested. One change I didn't make a drafting change on, or one request I didn't make a drafting change on, and that was the grant program. Because my notes were just not, they weren't detailed enough to, because there was notes on doing a match, but then not necessarily doing a match. And I just didn't, and that's my fault, didn't have enough clarity to do that.
Oh. Maybe it's your fault.
But I will step through the rest of the changes. The first change is on page 10. This is the request that the PRO be registered as a 501c3 nonprofit entity. There was also a request that the board of that entity include representatives of retailers, redemption locations, solid waste management entities, and solid waste haulers. So you have a 501(c)(3) and you have a directive for their board to include entities that are part of the collection system.
Members have questions about this?
I just want to note, when I was looking at Connecticut's tire program and how they did it, they set up an overarching national 501c3 and then created a subsidiary for the state. So that, I just wanted to put that on the table, that you could see a model like that with a parent and a subsidiary specific to the state.
And why did they do that?
I think they're thinking that they will feel pressure in other jurisdictions to do something similar, and they can create streamlined cost.
The tire industry
Yeah,
getting ready for us to.
and then you immunize yourself from multi-state liability if you have a subsidiary that's just doing it in each individual state.
Thank you.
Should I move on? Page 14. This is the floor. You discussed having some restrictions on the compensation that is required to be paid to locations that redeem beverage containers. This would set a 3-year floor under the plan that compensation could not fall below whatever the relevant deposit is for a beverage container plus 3.5 cents. So if it's a liquor container, it's going to be 15 cents plus 3.5. If it's all other types of containers, it would be 5 plus 3.5. 3.5 is the handling fee for liquor. 3.5 is the handling fee for all other containers that are part of a commingled program.
It's currently the lower end of, like, because the other one is like 4.5, right? Non-commingled.
For the and you can set it at whatever you want to set it at.
I think we're going to hear some more testimony on this, but we'll go with 3.5 for now.
On that page 14, line 15 and 16, in the provision that says the plan shall maximize the use of existing infrastructure, it includes reference to the type of infrastructure that is existing, retailers, existing redemption centers, and solid waste management entities. And
Representative Austin.
I'm just wondering, do we have to expand on use at all? Like, or would everybody understand what that means?
Sorry, expand on what?
Use.
Term use. It's maximizing the use when establishing points of collection. I think it's
Pretty clear? You
Yeah.
think? Yeah. Okay.
So at the bottom of page 14, lines 18 to 21, going on to page 15. There was a request, I can't remember from which member, it might have been Rep North, about making sure that locations provide for both expeditious redemption and also safe redemption. And so this would add a new component to the plan that all locations that provide for redemption of beverage containers shall provide expeditious redemption services that limit the need for persons redeeming containers to wait for redemption services, be it sites that are secure, sufficiently lighted, and managed to ensure the safety of persons redeeming containers, and that comply with all, that should say applicable laws related to the collection, transportation, and disposition of mandated recyclables. Mandated recyclables are your traditional recyclables. They're aluminum, glass, PET, paper, but they would be applicable to the collection of these containers.
Person of sacraments.
Michael, on part B, do we have standards that would be referenced to for secure, sufficiently lighted and such? How would you know if they're following this guideline?
There are no guidelines.
So who would be in charge of enforcing this?
So it's part of the plan. So ANR has to approve the plan and approve this component of the plan.
The artist would decide. Are you asking?
Would this would be just for the plan, or would this be once it's all stood up? How does,
But when it's stood up, the facility has to comply with the plan.
Do we have other standards like that for collection centers?
Well, that's not true. That's because, for example, when they're handling the more hazardous types of materials like lamps, there are environmental standards and collection standards for lamps. So there are some. And almost all of them have the comply with environmental law or environmental standards set by the secretary. Okay, next is page 22, which there's no change there, but this is where the grant language and the funding language begins and how you want to deal with it. There is a different proposal from ANR on the amount of money that will be available for grants. And the grant language is also different on page 25.
All right, different from what we have in this draft.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I just heard from Chris Rice that Bree Deatley will testify not till next Wednesday, but will hopefully bring us some more detailed information on what would be covered in the budget and yeah, how they would spend the money, how they envision it all kind of coming together, representing the industry. Move on.
So I don't have anything else.
Oh, great. Do folks have questions? Michael?
Back, when you're talking about the nonprofit and the who is included, the page 4. No.
Page 10.
Okay. So we're setting up PRO that is the manufacturers, but then we're asking them to also include these other folks on the board. Is that the idea?
I mean, I have looked at examples and there are corporations effectively that you mandate, that you dictate that they have certain representatives on their board. You make a good point in that the persons here that are assuming the liabilities and the costs are the manufacturers, and should these other entities be dictating how those costs are assumed? I see a point in not having them on the board. But
Not sure that
That was your point? We see where you're going, Michael. Where were you going?
I just wanted to be clearer on what the structure was. I just wasn't. To make sure that the way I was interpreting this was the way it's accurate.
I mean, if they would create that 501(c)(3) or subsidiary and have these entities on that board, you could also just create a stakeholder process where in development of any plan or components of the plan or amendment to the plan, that there be a stakeholder process.
Can you remind me what we had in there before? Was this, we just were silent on this?
You didn't have the designation as 501(c)(3). There is another program that requires 501(c)(3), but I can't remember it off the top of my head.
Another PRO. Which would it be, Matt Chapman?
For the record, Matt Chapman, Director of Waste Management Prevention Division. I am pretty sure that it's the HHW EPR program, but we can take action.
That's true, because that's the most recent one, yeah. Representative Sakowitz.
So above the new language on that page, in section B, it just says on or before manufacturers are going to apply to the secretary to form a PRO. So it's a group of manufacturers who are voluntarily getting together from different parts of the industry, different private entities, like corporations, presumably their representatives are getting together to form the PRO. And so are they on the board of the nonprofit entity, like as we're setting this up? Is that what this language is saying? And then we're also asking them to add in representatives of these other parts of the industry to join them on a board that's overseeing the PRO.
There isn't any mandate that every manufacturer that's part of a PRO is on the board or have a representative on the board. In the formation of the articles for the corporation, they'll probably establish what the board membership will look like and how members are elected. For purposes of complying with the requirements of this act, they have to have representatives of those entities that are part of the collection system. Now, if I were them, I would make sure that the board of manufacturers, members that are manufacturers, outnumbered the other representatives about 3 to 1.
If we're giving them that kind of leeway, then does that obviate the having these people on the board if they're simply going to get
I
dramatic?
don't think it obviates. I mean, their input is still important. They're still there. They're still learning what boards learn about programs and corporations. It's still a pretty valuable position for purposes of managing a program.
I think we're going to take more testimony on this topic and hear different perspectives. Representative North, do you have a question?
I did. One just a simple question. Way back on page 3, where we took out the not less than 5 cents and we're just sticking with 5 cents. That's still the plan. So even once the PRO is created, then they gotta meet these supposedly increasing goals. For redemption, 5 cents is still 5 cents. Right? We're not giving them latitude on the 5 cents.
Well, ultimately you will. For 3 years, you're not. You're basically saying that the floor is going to be 5 cents, but after that 3 years, they'll be able to negotiate for the cost.
For the deposit value.
Well, the deposit is separate from the handling fee, though.
Yes.
Are you asking?
That's what I'm asking about the redemption fee, the redemption value of the bottle or can. 5 cents is that redemption value.
We're not proposing to change that at all.
No, the deposit's not changing.
That's what I was making sure, that the PRO doesn't have control over it.
No, I mean, you're still going to be a bottle bill state. You're still going to have a deposit on every relevant container.
That deposit is established in statute, not by the PRO.
That's correct.
I want to make sure I was understanding that correctly. So then getting to the increasing goals, the percentages over time. I am a little concerned that we're looking at that as purely a redemption rate as opposed to overall diversion rate of stuff ending up in the landfill. That's what we're really trying, that's the problem we're really trying to ensure is solved, is stuff not getting into the landfill. If it goes through the recycling process and gets mailed up and used there, I think we're perfectly happy with that. So I'm just a little concerned that this, the goals are very, kind of rather narrowly defined toward the redemption rate.
But if it's the diversion rate, you're requiring the PRO to take responsibility over containers that are not subject to the deposit. So just thinking of aluminum, you've got hard cider, you've got all the liquid death waters, you've got things like that, which are not subject to
But that's the problem we don't really care under the, if you're under the overall diversion rate, under the covers, I really don't care what's going where, what program is being used. What I care is that the stuff's not ending up in the landfill.
But if you're a manufacturer trying to run a program, you're assuming cost from other manufacturers. I doubt they will be happy about it.
No, they're not necessarily. Why are they assuming costs for the manufacturers? They're not responsible for that in the PRO.
Oh,
No, but they have to collect, transport, and manage the disposition of that container, which is, because that's what the program does.
They're only responsible for tracking and managing the containers that are within the bottle bill. All I'm saying is that they should also be working with us as the legislative body to achieve the overall goals of the state, which is diversion, not just redemption.
I defer to the two over here.
So I guess I'll just say, I think that you should hold the Agency of Natural Resources accountable for the diversion rate. That's sort of the goal that we use as far as the effectiveness of locally of our programs, which would ensue, be both the redemption rate and also any recycling that comes through your normal and traditional system. I guess, if we're looking at the effectiveness of the bottle bill system, right? So looking at that system sort of as a component of our recycling system. then I think if you would want to keep it at the redemption rate so that you have the right metric to evaluate that system. So, but I don't disagree. I mean, like as a state, diversion is the fundamental thing, but when looking at the bottle bill, look at redemption rates.
So. Agreed. I like the idea of making A&R the one responsible for getting to 90% diversion or 95% diversion. 100% diversion, ideal. But I'm far less concerned. It's very interesting to know what the redemption rate is. That's an interesting statistic, but I don't know that we necessarily need to be increasing the redemption rate all the way up to 90%. There's going to be a lot of people like Sarita who likes to, with the Boy Scouts, take their bottles or to just recycle them. So their redemption bottles so that the money goes other places. Clean water, yeah. I don't know, I guess. There's a level of behavioral change required to achieve this, which I don't know that we really care about. I'm wondering why we're tasking an externally unelected body to drive toward it. That's what I'm concerned.
Representative Chapin.
I just want to say I don't agree with you that that's the main goal is diversion. I personally think the bottle bill and having these kinds of more closed systems that are closer to keeping material more pure so that we can get higher rates for them in the market and manufacturers can have more access to raw material that is coming. Certain manufacturers wouldn't use the material that's coming through the larger diversion system and recycling system because it's not clean enough. So while that's not always true, it is sometimes true. And so in terms of full cycle use of materials, this is a very forward thinking program because at some time, maybe right now we're getting some certain kinds of materials like aluminum that come through the recycling and solid waste district system in pretty good shape and is a pretty good raw material or recycled material for manufacturers. But glass, on the other hand, totally dysfunctional, right? So you can't really reuse that material for that same kind of product. It's getting way downgraded into generally earthen material. So I guess I just would say that markets and systems for reusing material in the manufacturing process change and ebb and flow over time. And the cleaner we can keep material, the more likely manufacturers have access to that material at a decent cost, and costs come into play. So diversion from the landfill and from our, litter are not the only main reason for something like a bottle bill. There is this other piece around of full cycle thinking. So to me, that is why we want to increase redemption, while we also have other reasons to also care about in larger picture around A&R waste management systems, the diversion rate. So I really think for the bottle bill language, we should be tracking and incentivizing increases to the to the redemption rate.
What page are the redemption rates on?
18.
That was wrong. Yeah, having visited multiple MRFs in US and Canada now, the story that I hear when I ask that exact question is always that, well, we bail up our stuff and it's all bound to specification. We sell it on the secondary market to specifications that demand a certain price, and we can meet those highest specifications is what they tell us. For aluminum and for the plastics. Now glass is, I agree, glass is a different story. Glass is a different story, just because it's so difficult to do, so heavy. And usually it's the weight is the issue, glass. Transporting it very far is not very viable. That's the main reason why most of the glass doesn't get turned back into bottles, is because it's too heavy to bother transporting it far enough to get to a bottle molten, you know, a glass bottle manufacturer. It's just too heavy to bother to transport, so it's much easier just to turn it into sand, which you get used locally. So I don't know that I agree. Or, of course. Entitled to agree, disagree.
Okay, I'm gonna bring us back to the bill and say, the redemption rate goals are on one hand, lovely and magnificent, but to 2042, 90% fees. I'm not even sure what the world's gonna look like in 2042. So I thought actually maybe we had agreed to backing off of those in a previous conversation a
Yeah.
little while ago. And ending at a different, like maybe just keeping 1 and 2? Does that seem familiar to folks?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, so I think,
I would be happy.
if we do, okay.
We agree on that.
2032, 80%.
Yeah. It just feels like we'll have a better sense of where we're headed, than predicting. Okay, Matt Chapman, are you prepared to respond to these changes now, or would you like to wait?
Like me to come up and testify.
Thank you, Michael.
Good afternoon. Again, for the record, Matt Chapman, Director of Waste Management Prevention. DEC, I guess so walking through the changes in my relative levels of concern, with that being the most concerned first. I'm concerned about a floor handling fee and what that does to the system actually working. And my concern is that it sets up, it skews the incentive structure within the system so that basically the system we have in the future is going to look a lot like the system we have today. It's not going to create the financial incentive for the PRO to invest in equipment, to lower labor costs, and then pass those reduced costs on in a reduced handling fee. This is going to basically encourage them to just take the least cost approach to dealing with things, because there's never going to be any change in what they have to pay for collection in the process. So I guess I would say, the agency's coming in here with a belief that letting the system and negotiations work themselves out, because I think, again, you're going to have some places where 3.5 cents is not going to be adequate, and it's going to be a lot more than 3.5 cents to make it work. And there's going to be, I think, some areas where the volume and everything else, 3.5 cents is great. In fact, more than what's necessary for costs. So it's just a concern with how it affects the underlying economics of the system and the incentive structure for the PRO and what they do going forward.
Yeah, understood. Representative Sadkowitz.
I think I understand what you're saying, but can you just kind of walk us through like a scenario that would sort of make it more real?
I'll try. So say you have a $100,000 piece of equipment that you're going to buy and put into, the PRO is going to buy and put into a redemption center. That $100,000 piece of equipment means you have to have, let's say, 1/10 of one person sort of checking on the equipment to make sure that it's operating appropriately at any given time, as opposed to having a staff of people sitting there sorting bottles and cans, right? So your labor costs as a redemption center go down significantly as a result of this new piece of capital equipment that you did not have to buy, the PRO did. But what you get paid stays the same, right? So you would still be paid the same amount as if you had, let's say, 2 people you had to employ to basically sort bottles and cans behind the turnstile or what have you historically that they've done, even though you're down to 1/10 of one person to basically make sure that the machine doesn't have an alarm going off on it.
So you're saying, why would the PRO spend $100,000
Why-
on this machine?
When they,
If they're still gonna be spending the same amount on handling fees instead of a lower amount, which would be basically their return on investment.
correct.
Well, the PRO is not paying for that machine, so. Right, where the state is paying for it.
Well, there's a grant program, right? I guess I'll just say my expectation, I mean, I'll let other people talk about what the costs are going to be. I think there's a lot of equipment that's going to need to be purchased in this process. And I think at the end of the day, we'll be looking to the PRO to be the one who's outfitting the system. I mean, if you start thinking about if every retail store in the state of Vermont that has 5,000 feet of retail space now needs to have some sort of collection infrastructure, in addition to all of the other redemption opportunities that are going to be out there. I think that there's a large cost. And again, my expectation and hope is that we don't invest to the minimum.
Representative
Thank you.
Tagliavia.
So I'm just trying to figure out what this PRO, this building with this equipment that's gonna be sorting looks like.
Mhm.
I've been to a couple of MRFs. How different is this sorting system gonna look from a MRF, or is it gonna be exactly the same, just with different ownership?
It will be completely different. So you'll have a piece of equipment. There's probably a number of different ways they could end up doing this, some of which do look like a MRF. But I think at the end of the day, what you're looking at is something where you as a consumer go in, put your bottles and cans into a piece of equipment. It could be a bag drop. It could be something you feed cans into. There's a lot of different things out there that you could use. Sometimes you get your money right back at that moment. Other times you have an account and it credits your account after it's been sorted at some offsite facility. On the processing into the equation, like, so when all of the bottles and cans and such get processed and baled prior to being shipped for their ultimate disposition, it looks a lot like a MRF. Right, that part of the equation where it all sort of gets centralized. So Tomer has a facility in Essex, I believe. That facility looks a lot like MRF, right?
It already exists.
It already exists, yes.
Are you all set?
Yeah.
I guess I'm wondering, I just want to talk a little bit about every retailer over 5,000 square feet becomes a redemption center, which they currently are now,
In theory, yes.
theory, but not in practice.
Correct.
Have you all mapped what it would look like how many redemption centers does that get us if they all actually redeemed? Like, then do we still have deserts of redemption? Or do we have too many for the amount of PRO capital investments we want to make?
So we haven't done that mapping. I mean, we would be looking at the PRO, and I think frankly, part of the startup, right, of the PRO to basically go in and do the mapping of where are those retail places at? What does it look like on a map? Do we have sort of areas where there isn't adequate coverage? What do we need to do in those areas to make sure there's sufficient opportunities for redemption there?
Do you imagine that's where the capital investments will be made, in the sort of redemption deserts, and then the handling fees would stay the same where it's sort of is a smaller retailer that
I mean, I'll be honest, I think that, the things that tend to drive costs are labor and throughput, right? The cost it takes to hire a person in a given location and the amount of material that's going through a redemption center. So it's, in some place like in a rural part of Vermont where there's not as much throughput, the costs of running that are higher. And I would assume that the
the distributors are going to have to, the PRO is going to have to pay more in those areas. 3.5 cents may not be enough. It may be a cost that's higher than that.
So you're suggesting we remain silent on the.
Well, that's the agency's recommendation, right? And I think we have some concern. I mean, we think, I think if you want to inject anything, I think the right place to inject it is during the reporting requirement. So after there's a program report and recommendations about that comes in after 5 years of operation. So let's see how this has worked. Or do people think that the compensation structure that exists after the first 5 years of operation, is it fair? Right? Is the system operating well from a collector standpoint? And try and make adjustments after we've seen that data come in on how it's working in real life. All right. Do you want to get to number 2?
Yes.
All right. Number 2 is the concern about the various stakeholders on the board of the PRO. And it was a little, frankly, the concern is somewhat what Michael said. You've got people who have very different interests. Some of them are embedded in the beverage redemption system who are going to be on the decision-making board of a collection system. My concern is, I have 2 concerns. One is it's generally speaking, I think, a bad idea for A&R, the legislature, to say who should be on a board, right? We're getting kind of into the weeds at that point. But the other is these people may have personal interests that are not in alignment with the board that they're serving on, which creates conflicts and other challenges for those individuals in their capacity as board members. Because remember, your obligation as a board member is to represent the organization that you're sitting on, not your own personal interests, which again, I can see it creating some strange conflicts by having people. It feels like you almost may be setting up a set of conflicts of interest by doing this. So again, my recommendation is there is a stakeholder process in the plan review portion of this law that has those stakeholders before the agency ever sees the plan, that those stakeholders have an opportunity to sort of comment on it and make recommendations to the PRO on that plan. If the committee doesn't think that goes far enough, I am comfortable with a requirement that the PRO either has to accept their changes or in writing say why they didn't, right? So it's a procedural requirement that basically puts the PRO on the record as to being responsive to the concerns raised by this group of stakeholders.
Interesting. So originally we were silent on it. It's just kind of.
And I should just go ahead and say, I support the nonprofit corporation requirement.
Right.
So don't take my concern about the board to being concerned about them. I think I always assumed it would be a nonprofit corporation, but I think it's perfectly fine to require that it be one.
Yes, good. And so if I just heard you correctly, you're suggesting that in prior iterations, did we have a stakeholder group?
Yeah.
And that perhaps the board could just provide to you or your agency how they responded to requests from the stakeholder group.
Yes.
And if they didn't choose to do the suggestion, they would say why.
Explain why. I think we could work on language that does that.
Representative Sacco,
I would just wanted to push back a little bit on the conflict of interest within the board being a problem. I think it's actually fairly common for boards to have diverse opinions and not necessarily, all be lined up with exactly the same goals. And it just depends upon what the goal of the organization really is, not so much the individual members. So there are corporate boards, of private businesses that have employees, on those boards, and presumably the employees have different, perspectives than other members of the board, and they're there to work it out. So
I think that I think that's fair, right? I just think it could get complicated quickly. in the last one, and this may be best to just defer into next week, is issues surrounding the how we approach the grant system. And, I think when I was in here last week testifying on the grants, there was an initial proposal that went into the chair and the committee, and then subsequent negotiation that resulted in an alternate proposal that I submitted with my testimony. That alternate proposal has broad consensus around it, and the original one does not. So.
Michael, are you clear on which version Mr. Chapman's referring to and or?
The second version.
Yeah, the second
with
version.
No changes.
With no changes.
Try that on for our next round.
Okay.
Further thoughts on the redemption PRO before we shift gears?
I don't have any unless people have questions of me. I mean, I think there's one other, and I shared what I think is almost an editorial comment about an issue with liquor and lottery in their section where
Yes.
so that one feels like it's,
I was just.
that's my bad. It's, yeah.
We'll see that one then in
The next one, all right. So I'm happy to move on if there are no questions to any other topic you would like to take me to.
Let's see. Yeah, no, we'd like to hear your thoughts on the fire extinguishers in H632.
So I was working with the gentleman from the fire extinguisher group. And I mean, I think there's probably some additional work that needs to take place with the language that's there. I think that there is, I guess I will also say literally within the past maybe 5 to 10 minutes, I've received some comments from the solid waste management entities that they have some concerns
With the draft that we
draft
looked at.
exemption that we're looking at, yes. So, and I have not had a chance to thoroughly review what their concerns are or evaluate them. But I would note for the committee that they are voicing some concerns in this space. From the agency's perspective, I think if there is an adequate program in place that ensures when a extinguisher is collected at an HHW event, that there's someone that can be called to deal with that extinguisher, that we're going to be okay with that. And I think the question is getting everyone okay with the language so that there aren't other concerns that are created through the language. So I think we're close. There's still, I think, a few more minutes of work that need to be done. And to some degree, I'm deferring, there's a verb that needs to be changed, and I'm okay. I understand what their concern is with collect and the desire to have it be a different word there.
Reusing them or they're.
But again, I think the thing that's important to the agency, if you're not participating or involved with a voluntary manufacturer collection program that picks up extinguishers that are dropped off at an HHW event, then you need to be in the HHW EPR program. That is our position. And I think everyone appreciates that these are difficult to manage materials, and it should not fall on our municipalities to basically, we shouldn't be creating an orphan product that municipalities are required to pay for.
Okay, great. Sounds like you're close.
I think so. Again, there are some new concerns that just got brought to my attention. I have not had a chance to reflect on yet.
Great. Any further questions for Matt? Thank you for joining us.
Did you have tires too, or?
Love to hear about it.
If we're done with tires, I'm fine with that.
You have,
I have no epiphany.
I thought he was gonna take care of tires.
he's got,
I need to give you language.
yeah, yes.
Oh, that's it?
Okay.
You've already-
I will send you
I've drafted something. I'll send it to Michael.
Great.
And yeah, it's pretty simple and it can inevitably be improved upon, but I will send my first cut tomorrow.
We appreciate simple,
All right.
and we look forward to seeing it. Thank you for joining us again. We have someone from DMV coming at 3, so we'll take a brief recess until 3. Are you, Michael, are you clear on where we are with some of our moving parts on the, well, we'll start with the redemption PRO changes.
So in the bottle build, you want to see Matt's second proposal for the funding included in the draft, next draft. You want to, hold on a second. Want to correct the mistake that's in the liquor bottle language. You want to, I don't think you made a decision on the board or not.
I didn't hear what you said, Rob.
I actually like Larry's point, that leaving it the way it is, keep, because, I mean, if the concern is, conflict of interest, clearly the manufacturers themselves are invested as a conflict of, that's a conflict of interest. I mean, so why would considering recycling center owners or other people be considered a conflict of interest? I mean, they're all part of the same process, right? I agree with Larry's point.
Yeah, well, we'll hold on that, but we're going to hear back from the manufacturers on it as well.
Then the last change, it's striking the redemption rate goals for 2037 and 2042.
Yes.